We have a guest
Welcome.
today. Hello, everybody. Miss Corianne, my favorite. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm very excited for today. We had maybe 30 seconds to chat and I already have questions dripping out of my ears. So I hope everybody's ready with their pen, their notepad, and you better be in the comments and ready to bring some questions because
Today is big. So I will take the honor of, well, introducing ourselves, right? So for those of you who do not know myself, my name is Renee Kishi. I am a real estate agent here in the great state of California, but I'm also an investor-friendly agent. And so is Miss Corianne. And we come here every Tuesday because she and I have something different to give to the audience at large. So I've been in business now for 19 years, which I think Corianne might be closer to age of 19 in the time I've been in business. And I really love the avatar of investor and all things investing. So lately, and our guests can probably attest to this, I think maybe in the last 3 to 5 years, the word investor has been very synonymous with fixing and flipping and wholesaling. And he's going to have something to say about that as well. But actually, we do a lot of everything. So businesses, small lot developments, ground up stuff. So kind of any and everything. If you're in the great state of California, we're here to help. And then Miss Corianne, how are you? Talk to me.
I'm doing wonderful. I mean, I tell our audience this every week, but it's the truth. I would be calling you and we would be having chats, whether it's about spiritual, financial, life, business, you name it, every week. And honestly, we're just pulling back the kimono so everybody can be a part of it. And honestly, guys, this is the place to have the conversation because you have people that understand the game from so many different angles, from so many different aspects, but are all here for one reason, and that's to create the beautiful rainbow of getting further, faster together through communication. So it's the place to have the conversation, and we're just continuing to bring amazing people to the table who know these things even better than us. Drum roll.
This is what I'm saying in terms of me saying, oh, I've been in business for 19 years. I've been blessed to be in business for 19 years. I've learned a lot. I've touched a lot of fires. And one thing I would say to anybody who's either in the game or continuing to, continue to be in the game and new to the game is to stay humble. We don't know everything. And I think there's something like, I don't know, 10 or 20 people. It's an odd number of people that even as agents, we employ in a deal, right? So there's escrow, there's title, there's all these people, right? And so it behooves you to stay on top of your game, which leads us to our handsome guest who is here today, Mr. Kevin Sayles, who I've done transactions with. Kevin, I'm going to let him do his own introduction, but Kevin, for those of you who are in Southern California, will probably know Kevin. He's been around for a long time in title. He knows a lot of different things. This is why I really appreciate and love Kevin, because he's not just maybe your typical escrow officer, and he's going to explain some difference in titles, but he's not, we would flippantly say escrow officer, right? So he's not your typical escrow officer. He really understands investing, the investor mentality. And many people will ask me, because I've been around for a minute, hey, Renee, who do you know? Who's a good resource for you? And I've already vetted and done this. So I don't mind sharing the wealth because that's who I am as a person. And also because Kevin gets to make a living off of a referral or recommendation that I might be able to give. So take note, give him some love. Kevin Sayles, thank you for taking your precious time and being here so we can educate ourselves and the audience.
I'm so glad to be here. I love the opportunity to share real estate stuff and talk about real estate stuff with people that have questions, or, I just love being a part of real estate. It's what I love to do. And so thank you for having me. I really appreciate that. For those of you who don't know, I'm Kevin Sayles. I'm a vice president at Lawyers Title here in Los Angeles County. And I've been in the industry 31 years, been in the industry 31 years, and then in title specifically 25 years.
Ooh, Corianne, how that hit.
You might know. Well, I needed somebody to beat your record of these 19 years. So I'm glad Kevin's here to do exactly that.
Amen. And listen, you said, Corianne, he dropped a nugget and a bomb that I don't even actually know if I knew or in full transparency had forgotten, because we do flippantly use titles for things. The title rep, that's how we kind of say it. So before we jump into too many specifics, but Corianne, I want you to come back to that. Kevin, you did give yourself a little bit of an introduction, but I want to gloat on you a bit, because I was looking behind your kimono, and one of the things I read was that you've been involved in 15,000 transactions in your career. Is that really the case?
way more than that. I would, if I were going to bet money, I would say double. That came from a publisher when I wrote my first book. They were counting how many transactions have you done. We conservatively estimated 15,000, and that was in 2015. Here, 9 years later, I mean, I would be surprised if it wasn't 30,000.
Wow.
So he just slipped in author too, in case y'all didn't miss that. It just keeps going, this bio. I mean, honestly, tell us more. Start us off with everything. You've been in this for 35 years.
I never would have counted. I had years ago, someone asked me, how many probate transactions do you do a month? And I never count. To this day, I don't even know, like, how many do I do in a month? Because I don't count them. I don't think of them that way. I try to close every deal, whether it's a probate, an investor, first-time home buyer. I'm just closing, you know. But for this, they were saying, you know, for this book, you got to have this as a credibility statement. You've got to be able to show this. So I went back and counted. I actually found some old sales reports. I remember some of my numbers, and I went back and counted and then estimated. And then I took a chunk off of that, saying, okay, just in case we're wrong, let's just take a chunk off, and came up with 15,000. So as a title rep, I mean, the higher producing title reps, I mean, we open a lot of transactions every single month. And so you're doing a lot of volume. Now, the work I do on a transaction is less than 1/10 of what a real estate agent may do on a real estate transaction. But the fact is, the bad ones rise to the top, right? When you have those bad ones that need a lot of work, then sometimes you spend all day working on a deal. And it's always the $5,000 vacant lot in Barstow that takes all day, every day to get the work done. But yeah, so you know, we do a lot of transactions. I see a lot of things. I see a lot of issues. And for me, because of my expertise, I get phone calls. I mean, literally 1 hour ago, I got a call and don't know the folks. Prior to the call, I didn't know the folks. They said, this is who referred us. This is what we have. It's this situation and that's going on. And one of the family members just said, you can't sell the property. So how do we deal with this? You know? And so, it's always changing. It's never the same. I truly appreciate the smooth, easy ones, but I get a lot of the tough ones, you know, to help people get through their real estate situation.
Brilliant. And, you know, that's important because I think sometimes, especially in traditional retail, I know you see it because you see the crisis management of it, but the average agent probably doesn't have that much to deal with in a traditional sale with title. It's kind of easy peasy. Things get, you know, transferred pretty quickly and easily. At least that was my experience when I have done the side of things that's just traditional retail, because I still do. So as much as I prefer to work with investor types, if my best friend called and said, hey, can you help me buy my condo down the street? You know, there's usually not too much going on with that, right? So that's part of why we're having this show, because we want to bridge that conversation between the agents and investors, if not have some of the agents become more involved in investing, which isn't always the message in the brokerages. You know, it's kind of like they should call them richers, not brokers, because they're the ones really making all the money, and they're not necessarily sharing how do you exit out of this business, AKA retire, right? How do you exit out of it? And the conversation that you're having with a lot of investors is more so that, like, how can I hitch my wagon to this wheel? If that is where you see your future, you know, your money, part of your portfolio is to have real estate in your portfolio, and you want to get involved in the investor side of the game, you are absolutely 100% going to run into problems. I mean, it's just par for the course. I think sometimes there's a fantasy of, oh, you know, I'm just going to buy the ugly house on the block, or, oh, I'll just get, you know, a smoking deal for grandma's house. Well, you know, you're lucky if you kind of have a smooth transaction in that way. But I mean, Kevin, would you agree for the most part, like those are the harder transactions to deal with, the ones that are fixery or family or trust, or that you just made mention, you know, family member, right?
Yeah, I mean, everyone wants the $500,000 property, but they want to buy it for $250,000, right? Because there's equity in there. But that equity comes with some issues. There's some, you don't just buy it and the next day sell it for $500,000. You have to do some things to get to that point where it's now where you have to add value. And that's where challenges can come up and things can arise. While you were speaking, it just reminded me of a guy that he was, okay, so this gentleman was an heir to an estate, and there was a property needed a lot of work, and all these investors were telling him, just sell me the property, sell me the property. And he thought, I think he thought he knew more than the agent and me when we first talked. And he said, oh yeah, I don't need to do this, but he ended up listing the property to the agent. We started title work. I confirmed with them what I knew beforehand, because I had done some pre-work on it, that they had to have a probate case in California. With that situation, they had to have a probate case to be able to sell the property. And he ended up, within 2 weeks, canceled the listing with the agent. I guess he had listened to some investor saying they were going to buy it. And the agent was real distraught, like, oh, we're going to lose it. I said, just relax. Trust me, there's no investor in their right mind. He may get some investor that doesn't know what they're doing, but any investor that's been around for more than 5 minutes is going to know at the end of the day that this is going to have to be a probate case. So he's going to call you back. And literally, I don't know if it's 3 weeks or a month later, he calls me back. Hey, Kevin, we're back in play. We got that listing again, and we closed that deal in April or May. Just earlier this year, we closed that deal. So it's funny to me because, people think there's a shortcut to get there. There's some work that has to be done. You have to add that value to be able to get there to the end to be able to, close the deal.
And patience. I heard that with you with patience. I think it's gotten worse. I've been around a minute like you have, Kevin, even though you've been around longer. I think what I mean by that is, modern technology has changed the game, has changed the playing field. No matter how old you are or kind of how long you've been in the business, if you've been in the business, maybe even the last, I'd say 10 or 15 years, you've seen a difference. And I assert that some of these television shows, because for like 1 minute when I moved here, I worked in television, not because I wanted to. I had a neighbor that asked me to do it. So I did see behind the curtains. And there's a famous last terminology called camera ready. Everything is camera ready, which means that it's totally a bag of trash most of the time, what you're actually looking at, whether they built it with sticks and bricks and then they put it in front of the camera. So what you see is camera ready, but it's not always, what the reality is. And my point of that is there's so many more television shows out there in general, so many more channels, so many more places to get your attention. And that's exactly what people are looking to do, is to get your attention. They're not necessarily experts in their field. It's just a lot of opinions. So part of why we're also doing this show is to bring experts on, literal experts. I mean, Kevin, just in his years, let alone the number of transactions that he's done, I would assert, if I was watching this show, like, I better listen to this guy and don't listen to the television shows so much. So it's been very interesting for me, as now I can call myself a seasoned agent, even talking to other agents, because I prospect other agents on a daily basis as to what they're saying. If they've been in the business for maybe the last 10 years, 12 years, it was Easy Street. And now it's not so much Easy Street. So I say that on the coattails of what you're sharing to implore the audience that it's only getting more challenging as a business. But the truth is that it should have always been this challenging. This is real estate. This is somebody's biggest asset. And if somebody's coming along with the dark underbelly of being in the investor world and promising, everything, the stars and the moon, unfortunately, people really get their equity taken away from them. Or as an agent, you've got to have patience, because sellers are going to get wowed by the shiny objects. They've never not done that, but they'll probably come back, like Kevin said. So for the agent, have some patience. And if you're an investor out there, please do right and be better for the industry, because it's really given kind of, the title of investor a bad name. Like, I'm sure that's all I've experienced, So
well, we all know I'm the newbie in the room, and I've been here for 5 years, and I know this for sure. I definitely know that there are good players, and there are players that are not showing up to their fullest and best ability. And honestly, it spoils the milk for all of us. I'm like itching in my pants, honestly, to turn the page a little bit and drain as much knowledge as we can out of Kevin in terms of the real specifics on what's going behind the email that an agent sends or an investor sends off to one title company. And then we don't really know what's going on in the background. I think one way to start that off is, so you said you're a title rep, but there's a difference between that and an escrow officer who I might be emailing. I need to know all the titles and who they are and what they do.
That's good. And I'm going to explain it. I'm going to explain it based on Southern California. That's where I work. That's where I've always worked. I have experience in Northern California. Most of the companies that I worked for had offices there. It's done differently there. Northern California is what we call escrow driven. Southern California is what we call sales driven. We also do business very differently than most of the rest of the nation. Here in LA County, I mean, a small title company maybe has 30 employees if you include the employees at the plant and the employees doing business, but when I've met title company owners in other states, and one guy we were at a conference and we're in line to grab lunch, and it's like, yeah, it's me, my wife, and every once in a while my son helps out. That was the whole title company. So those are agency states. So the title agents are different there. So here in Southern California, first, to answer this question about the escrow officer and the title officer and the title rep. So the escrow officer is here in Southern California. Escrow and title are separate a lot of the time. They can be together. Every title company has an escrow division, but oftentimes they're separate. With a lot of the investors I work with, I tell them title company escrows in Southern California, not necessarily in other places, but in Southern California, title company escrows are more conservative because they're under the Department of Insurance. So I tell, when investors come to me, and they do often, I tell them, don't do escrow with us. And some people kind of think it's weird because, like, well, you work at the company. Yeah. And my escrow officers are phenomenal. They are really good escrow officers, but I don't have my clients use them because if there's wholesaling or something like that, there may be some things that our escrow officers by our company guidelines cannot do or cannot work with, or different things that they don't want to do or may not be able to do. And so I tell them, let's do that with an outside escrow. So that's number one. But what escrow is escrow is the non-biased third party that deals with funds. They deal with documents and make sure whatever's supposed to happen in the contract is what happens. So they don't require, oh, you have to do this or you have to do that inspection or whatever. They just go by contract says. In the contract, you said seller's going to pay for this and buyer's going to pay for that. So when the funds come in and they're divvying up the funds in the escrow, they make sure that happens. They're the entity that does the final closing statement. They are the company that tells title when to close. We take instruction from escrow. They say, close tomorrow. I've sent you these documents. Issue the policy for this amount. Issue the blah, blah, blah. Pay off these taxes, pay off these loans, etc. So they give us the instruction. So your escrow officer in Southern California is your point person. I've said for years they have the toughest job because they have to deal with both agents, the title company, the appraiser, the contractor, the city inspection, all the different parties that are part of this transaction. The escrow officer is dealing with them in and out and making sure this comes from them and goes to that person. So they have a very, very tough job. If you were to look at a bicycle tire, I view the spokes as all of us in the transaction. The title company is a spoke, the appraiser is a spoke, the lender is a spoke, the real estate agent is a spoke, et cetera, buyer, seller. The hub that holds all those spokes to that wheel is the escrow officer. That's how I look at it. Okay, so that's their role. And we often get lenders, especially lenders from out of state, that will email me as the title company, and they'll say, hey, we need an estimated HUD. Well, we don't do that, or estimated closing statement, or the CD, I guess they call it now. We don't do those as the title company. The escrow does that. Or they want docs drawn a certain way. We don't deal with drawing of the docs. The escrow company does that. So there's kind of like a balance of powers and separation of powers here in Southern California. Now let's flip that forward to the title company. So the title company, we're the one that receives, typically, we receive the wire from the lender. Buyer may bring their money to escrow, but depending on the financial situation in the transaction, the buyer also might wire to title. But generally speaking, the lender wires to us. We take those funds, pay off whatever needs to be paid off, and then give the rest of the proceeds to escrow to deal with the rest of the balancing. So we deal with the stuff on the property, paying off the things on the property. We issue a policy that covers the buyer so that the seller's liens are not affecting the property anymore. We're giving an insurance policy affecting that, implementing that fact for that buyer. Our policy ensures the lender that the buyer is who they say they are. If it was a customer impersonation or some fraud that was done, a lot of times we as a title company, we're on the hook for that customer impersonation because we're verifying that the seller is who they say they are, that the buyer, if we're insuring that for a loan for the lender, that the buyer is who they say they are, and that everything is good there. And, the lien positions, we're insuring the first mortgage that it's in first position, not in 10th behind some other liens. So those are some of the things that we do as a title company. Now, I want to explain the title officer's role as opposed to the title rep role. This is what I alluded to before we were talking, because some people try to belittle the title rep because we're salespeople. But when I explain the role, I think especially if you're an investor, you'll understand the difference. The title officer's job is, I think the technical term is, they verify the insurability of the transaction. In other words, they're preventing problems. Let's make sure we don't have any problems down the road We don't have any claims. We don't have anything coming back to bite us later. That's their job. They're appointed, so to speak. I mean, they are registered, I guess might be a better word. And these are probably not the technical terms that I'm using, but the title insurance company that actually the policy is written for recognizes that title officer as a person that can issue their policies. Okay, so they verify the insurability of the transaction. Essentially, for the title company, their job is to prevent risk. Their job is to prevent risk. If this is in the gray area, a little risky, could come back with some problem later, their job is to prevent that. My job, on the other hand, I'm a salesperson. I am a commissioned salesperson. I have one job. My one job is to close title orders, period. That's it. Now, if we have to argue on why we should or should not close your transaction, who do you want to argue that? The title officer or me? You better have me.
I want sales arguing for me every time. Sorry,
that's right.
That's who I need.
You want me. You want me arguing it, right? And
absolutely.
The beauty of it, where I've kind of bridged the gap in some way, is that I get highly involved in the underwriting. I get highly involved in preventing that risk. Because of the territory I've worked, the people that I've worked with, the investors that I've worked with for I was going to say millions of years. I guess I haven't been in the business that long, but for all these years.
Mean, 35 years in the business, it feels like millions to some of us, especially if you think I'm close to 19, y'all. Keep that up. First of all,
it's only 31 years in the business, okay? I'm not old enough to be in the business for 35, so, okay. Anyway,
my bad.
So because of my experience and background, I realized if there were a title book, right, that says this is how you handle this thing, the title book says we need A to resolve this. My job is to go in there and go, hey, I know we need A, but you know what? B, we can't get either. And we can't get A. But C is not the same as A, but it can mitigate our risk. Here's how. Because in addition to C, I'll give you D. We can get C and D, and that will solve everything. And if I had a nickel for every time they go, you know what? That'll work. I love when that happens. I start tap dancing. That's what I thrive off, is saying, you know what? Not that I'm looking for, changing the rules or going around the rules, but the easy ones are when, hey, we need this document and that document comes in. The hard ones are when, like, we need this document and that's not available because of life, because of people's normal situation, because homeowners don't understand the documents they should keep or the records that they should have. So I love it when I can come in and go, okay, I know we want A, but we're not going to get A. That's impossible. It does not exist. That document was shredded or burned in a fire or whatever. We don't have it. But what if we can get this and this, and that should protect us to be able to close? So my job is 100% sales. Now, obviously, if I'm getting approvals and getting things through and all that stuff comes to bite our company in the behind, after a while, they're going to be like, don't approve anything more for Kevin, right? So I have to be very careful to make sure I am mitigating risk for our company, but doing it in a way that works with the humans that are in our business, because people do things that don't make sense, that aren't financially smart, aren't smart for real estate, aren't correct for law, or sometimes they do things that are criminal and maybe they didn't know it. So my whole thing is to decriminalize situations, say, don't just think of this person as doing a crime. That's not what they were doing. They just didn't know that you had to do that, and figure out the right way to get through this scenario, mitigate the risk for the title company and get the deal closed. Because you know what? If I don't get the deal closed, I don't eat. And I like to eat.
And eating is expensive in California, especially. So
it is. And I like the expensive food. I do. That's the good stuff.
Me and you, Kevin. Me and you.
That was the best breakdown I've ever gotten as to what's going on. And I guess one of my questions is for all of our audience that isn't coming from California, it's really just those two things are in one house. But it's still kind of separated as to who is doing what job. Because even from my escrow officer, I know I've received an email from a title rep specifically about a problem and not understood the difference as to those roles. Guys, if that was helpful, can you please drop some love in the chat for how amazing Kevin is? And I just thank you for being here for this hour to really just download us so that we know how to interact and show up on the other side. Because again, we get further faster together. For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't eat until I close deals either.
Right.
Exactly.
I just got to say it, and I'm going to say this, you know, in fear of sounding like I'm bragging, but it's just the truth of it, and it'll shed even a little more light. I mean, probably about 4 or 5 years ago ish, somewhere in there, this escrow officer was almost yelling at me that I've already run it by the title officer, so it can't be done. It just, you know, you can't do that. And I called the escrow officer because I needed some information to be able to get the approval I was going to get. She reluctantly gave me the information, but told me, you can't do it. I've already run it by so-and-so and it can't be done. And maybe she just doesn't realize that the person I talked to is the underwriting authority above those title officers that she talked to, and that told them no. And, you know, we have a few different managers. You know, I know which manager to take things to that's going to be flexible and going to see things kind of the way I see things. So bottom line, I got it approved. And I didn't want to rub it in that escrow officer's face, but I had to let her know so that she would let the agents know that this deal is moving forward. And I let her know that. And I never really got any response. I wonder what she thought of that. I'm sure she was, I don't want to say she was disappointed, because she probably wanted the deal to close too. But, you know, in other instances, people will go, man, Kevin, you did awesome. I'm so amazed. How did you get that done? This one was silent. And I was like, she was so firm on wanting this to not be able to be done. And I knew it was going to be done even before I talked with the powers that be. So, you know, that's the thing. Like I said before, I love the easy ones that come with everything, all their ducks in an order and everything. But, you know, I feel like I earn my pay on those ones that have a tough situation.
Absolutely.
And that's where we get to learn. And it really matters, right? Because there's a couple of things I can think recently too, right, of my own examples where I'm kind of tooting my own horn, like you were saying. I say it humbly, where it's like, dang, I really kind of saved the day on that, but it's only because of experience. So this goes to, you know, making sure when, this is to the audience, making sure when you are interviewing or choosing your people, don't just necessarily go with splaying out on a Facebook page, even if it's a private group that you belong to and that you've paid for, because Corianne and I are in Astro Flipping. So, you know, we're in a community, but I'm just encouraging everyone to make sure that you do your own homework so that that person, like a Kevin, you know, is resonant with you, how you want to do business, understands what's going on, and can really, you know, have your back. Because I'm telling you guys, like when it comes to these deals, that it really is, when it's easy peasy and it doesn't feel like much, you're like, oh yeah, maybe I don't feel like I earned my keep in this. Oh, real estate's so simple. I'm just going to flip a contract or close a deal and make all this money. But boy, oh boy, it's not much, really, it's not like that most of the time. And we don't necessarily talk about it. It's almost like par for the course of the day. You know, an agent yells at us, escrow officer doesn't know what's going on, whatever. You know, we're not really on Instagram every 5 minutes, you know, talking about it. And so people don't really know the day to day, but this is really where you want to pick your people that do lock arms with you and want to earn their keep and do right by the business. And that's why you've been here for all these years too, right? So take something. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And just me personally, I always had interest in real estate. And when I was in banking for 6 years before I started in title insurance, I learned an immense amount of things about our industry, about title, specifically escrow, closing loans, etc., while I was in that banking experience. But I had two guys that informally, they don't even know they mentored me, but they informally mentored me with the conversations that we had. And it made me want to be a real estate investor and you were talking in the beginning about being able to retire. I knew that if my mindset back then was, in my 20s, was if I buy properties before I'm 30, then when I'm 60, those properties will be paid off because I'll have a 30-year mortgage, and I'll have income in my retirement. And you know, it was as simple as that. And so it's why I invest in real estate. It's why I'm an investor. So it helps. But the fact that I am an investor helps me to understand the things that people are going through. You know, I've had two of my grandparents' estates that had to go through probate. So I understand what the family deals with and how that kind of goes. I have a trust myself, and my father has a trust. So I understand what happens when you have a trust and dealing with that. You know, I have siblings and step siblings and all of that, you know, so I understand what it's like to have people that are a brother or maybe an equivalent heir, but they're not necessarily the person you grew up with. So it helps me empathize and kind of understand scenarios that people have going on in their lives, you know, when it comes to dealing with their real property. I also have four boys. 3 of them are adults, but 2 of them are young adults, you know, 20 and 22, and 1's 17. And I know that if something happened to me, they would have no clue on some of the finances, you know. A couple of years ago, my 17-year-old, I think it was a year or a year and a half ago, my 17-year-old asked, we were talking about some stuff. I try to share as much real estate stuff as I can with him. And this is what he asked. He said, wait a minute, you mean when you pay off a house, there's still more stuff you have to pay? He didn't realize you still have to pay taxes and insurance. And how many situations do I deal with where grandma died, she had a free and clear property, and they don't have insurance. So when the fire happened, now no one can repair the fire damage to the back. You know, they aren't paying their taxes, so they're facing a tax foreclosure. But, you know, for someone being in the business, you might think, oh, that's just common knowledge. Everyone knows you got to pay your taxes and insurance, whether you have a loan or not. But it's not, you know, from a pretty sharp 16-year-old, there it goes. Wait a minute, you still have to pay for something when you pay off the house? You know, so it's important that I think these perspectives help me in dealing with folks when there's a guy that inherited a property, whether he's 60 or 20, and I've seen both, and they're not paying their taxes. I can kind of understand why a little better.
Yeah. Nobody told them. And it's not the sexy conversations. You know, people love to watch the HGTV, you know, before and afters, and they just want the after. But this is like, well, wait, how do you, it's an asset, you know, it's an inanimate object, but in essence, it's a kind of a living, breathing thing, right? There's responsibilities that go with ownership. And sometimes I feel like that message isn't really there, you know, to the general public, maybe let's say through television. It's just all the sexy. And people want sexy, and that sells, right? Because it's television. But it's like, well, wait a minute. There's a responsibility that comes with that. And you know what? If you're super clear that you don't want all that responsibility, then maybe owning a lot of real estate isn't for you. And there's other ways to build wealth, you know, for yourself, because these assets cannot just be, you know, left to the wind. You have, you know, tenant issues. You've got all kinds of stuff. So it's checking in on yourself to say, do I have the bandwidth to actually own real estate? Do I have the maturity to actually own real estate? Am I willing to learn? Am I willing to step into that so that I take care of it and it takes care of me? And that is just, couldn't be said enough, you know, from the shout it for the back row, you know, kind of thing. Right.
Yeah. Right.
I was going to comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you don't mind, I was going to comment because I think you said something to this effect earlier, but you know, back to the conversation of owning real estate and being an investor, the TV shows really, like, I love watching the HGC TV. I love seeing a dumpy house and seeing it come become beautiful. But I started getting so upset because they would say, we remodeled the kitchen for $7,000. And I'm like, the cabinets alone cost more than $7,000. What do you mean you did all the tile, you know? And so I stopped watching them because I got tired of seeing how they show the numbers, and I look at the numbers and I go, there's no way I could do that. Now, granted, if I were to flip something, I would have to pay retail for the contractor, right? And if I'm the guy on TV, all I'm paying are the salaries because they probably work for me. I'm guessing, you know, they're the contractor and they work for me. But then I talked to someone who did a show, and they're like, yeah, we didn't make any money on that flip, but it was good for the show because the property looked great and all this. And that was one where they didn't show the numbers, so they didn't lie about it. But I'm just like, they glorify it so much. And I've flipped a property or two. I think every property I've ever purchased, except for maybe two, every property that I've ever purchased needed work. So even though I didn't necessarily flip them, they all needed repairs, you know, from the start. And I had to work that into my budget with the rental and everything. But, you know, seeing some of the stuff on TV where they talk about, oh, we get it done for this. And you know what? I will say this also. I think our work, I have properties in Florida right now, and in Florida, they can get stuff done cheaper than I can get it done here in California. So maybe different areas across the nation, it's easier to get stuff done for a lower dollar amount.
Not that much though. Yes and no, right? Because Corianne and I do look at properties around the country, and I do too, Kevin. Like I'm licensed here, I live here, but I look around, you know, because I've broadened my scope, and you can get it done for less expensive because of the expectations, right? Like people are okay with certain fit and finishes type of thing. But yes and no. I mean, you're still going to do probably $40 minimally, you know, a square foot type of stuff. So anyway, I know the TV shows really are living.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump off this rabbit hole with you for a little bit, because I think one of my biggest issues with that is that an agent who only has one tool in their tool belt, let's say that's listing, they're not a part of investment universe that we are. And they walk in and they help a seller. And by helping a seller, they say to them, hey, all you've got to do is update your kitchen. And then this is ready to list. And then we'll get photos and all of that. Just keep me posted on the updates in the kitchen. And then they walk out. And then the seller watches one of those homes and says, oh, okay, great. A beautiful kitchen that's going to bring the value of my property up should cost about $7,000. I have $7,000. And then they go about that process, but they say to their contractor, I only have $7,000. Keep it under that. And the contractor goes, okay. And they paint it with a little bit of a flick of the wrist. They take a little bit less energy and effort because they don't have the right dollar amount. And then they don't get the equity that they're expecting out of that renovated fully kitchen because their expectations were just set up poorly. And I think, you know, having conversations and connections like this is what's so helpful in being able to say, hey, what are the other options we have to help this daughter out who's in this probate situation? Because I know for a fact it's not just dragging her through a 6-month process to list it after she's done the work. And those kinds of scenarios are why we have to have these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to pull up Yoli's question because I think it's a great one. How would you suggest an investor reach out to title reps? Would they contact the title companies directly in their market, or how can we create symbiosis as an investor?
That's good. You know, and it's funny because I was going to answer, if you go to the various different, from Phoebe to RIAs and all these different organizations that do investor meetings or meetups, you can meet some there sometimes. But to be honest with you, I don't go to those anymore. So I think I'd be a good person for you to meet if you were looking for a rep. So, you know, unfortunately, I wouldn't. But coming to some of the forums and maybe asking folks that are involved, like, hey, we're on Ask an Agent Anything, right? I mean, if you were to ask you guys, hopefully you would refer me or a title person that you know that does a good job. So that's one way. You probably could reach out to a title company and maybe ask someone there who on their team is good at dealing with whatever, if you're wholesaling or if you're flipping or whatever, you know, who's good at dealing with that. And they could probably point you to someone as well. But I've met a lot of the investors that I work with through various different meetups and groups and organizations that have investor meetings. I just tend to not go to those as much as I used to, because a lot of them are evenings and weekends. I used to go to them regularly, and I just kind of don't do it as much anymore, although I still love working with investors. So, you know, I guess that's my answer.
Yeah.
Good question.
And sometimes your name also, like a name will bespeak itself, where oftentimes when I say Kevin Sayles, or when I'm filling out a residential purchase agreement, which is called here in California, before there's actually signatures on everything, then it becomes the contract, right? So it's a residential purchase agreement. I will put Kevin's name in there, like, hey, this is lawyer's title with Kevin. He's my guy. That's what you're announcing on the RPA. And people will be like, yeah, okay, I know Kevin. So it matters, right? These are the things that you're never going to hear, really. You've got to sort of hitch your wagon to a wheel, to a good agent, to a good other investor who is going to know what's going on. And then you can kind of look, you know, behind the scenes and see how they do things. How do they fill out a contract? And you can look and say, oh, that's interesting. You know, why did you put Kevin's name, actually put his name in there, not just lawyer's title, but Kevin's name? There's a reason for that. You're actually calling out the person you want to do business with. So that's a little bit left of center of what you were saying, but it's an addition to why names and reputations matter so much. And on that coattails, you know, if you're talking to seasoned agents, this is for the audience, right? Because a lot of our audience does prospecting to agents. If you're speaking to agents that are seasoned, because a lot of them will tell you they are, oh, I've been in this business for 40 years. You can also tell by their DRE number, the Department of Real Estate number, how long they might have been in the business. So this is like little tips and tricks for newbies, that if you're seeing that and you're actually speaking to an agent saying, how can we develop a relationship? How can we ongoingly do business together? Then you might want to ask on a second or third date, hey, you know, who do you do business with? And that's another way to kind of collect names if you can't or don't want to get out to the face-to-face events. I've done that myself too over the years. So any other questions? What do we got, Corianne? There's a lot of activity in this chat today. Goodness.
Honestly, guys, we have a lot of posers in the chat today who are just throwing down some stuff that they shouldn't be. And I'm actively banning them. But honestly, you would really cheer me up if you just drop some love into the chat and change the vibes that are happening there, because they're. And Kevin is not, he's awesome. So we just need to shift that a little bit, y'all. And okay, here's my question, because I think a lot of investors know somewhere in the back of their head that if they actually took the time and energy to really get to know their title company and their title rep, that there are things they can learn and benefits that you have that they wouldn't have otherwise. Can you give us just a little tidbit as to maybe how you work with some of your best clients and some of the ways that why we need to take good care of you? I know it, but let's let them know.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I'll answer this from an investor standpoint as well as from a real estate agent standpoint. So for the real estate agents, you know, naturally, so this is an interesting phenomenon, right? And I'm going to ask this question, and you don't have to answer out loud, but just think of your answer. Would you ever, anyone on this watching this, would you ever buy a property, get a home inspection, but don't look at the home inspection? Of course not. You're the home inspection, as soon as it comes in, probably before you can even put your bottom on a chair, you're looking at that. Let's see what's wrong. What do they identify? But countless real estate agents out there get a title report, but they don't look at the title report. A home inspection is a report about the physical condition of the property, the building, right? A title report is a report, preliminary title report. In other states, they call it a title commitment, but here we call it prelim. A prelim is a report about the ownership condition of the property. Are there any ownership issues? And so many people don't look at them. So for the agents, what I do for a lot of the agents, when I get a listing that or sale that's open with me, I review the prelim and I'll call or text them and be like, hey, there's nothing, no big thing, nothing to raise your hair about. Or I'll say, hey, there's this issue, or get us this documentation, just so they have a heads up. Because it's so funny how countless times title is like, a lot of people don't even know about title. They don't even think about title because their first deals, everything was clean and nice on their title. But some people have said, like, title's never a problem until it's a problem, because you get that one deal where you're ready to close now and you can't close because there's some title issue. But a lot of times the issue was reported many times before you even wrote the offer, because sometimes we do our prelim before the contract is written, before it's even on the market, or when it's coming on the market. So point is, I'd like people to have upfront, a prelim. If you open escrow today, meaning you're putting your EMD deposit today, and that transaction is consummated today, even if we don't open the title till right now, 2 to 3 days on most properties, our prelim is done. It's a little longer for commercial and for some other things, but usually 2 to 3 days, our prelim is done. And let's know about what issues are there now, rather than letting that go beyond and finding out at the end of the deal. So that's one thing I do for real estate agents. Now, for investors, a lot more. I tell investors this all the time: call me and explain the scenario on the deal. Now, here's an important thing. I don't know if you guys played any sports, but I love sports, and I love sports analogies. If you don't know what a quarterback is, the quarterback is the guy who runs the offense on a football team. So imagine this. Do you think a coach wants to run this one play? Let's say he wants to run a sweep. Do you think he's going to tell the quarterback half of the play, or tell the quarterback something different than the actual play he wants to run? No. I've had to explain this to investors before, particularly with a family member that wasn't giving me all of the details. I said, listen, I'm the quarterback. And that family member to this day, 20 years later, calls me quarterback. It's so funny. I didn't mean to give myself a name, but I said, listen,
That's awesome.
I'm your quarterback. You have to tell me everything that's going on. I'll determine if everything needs to be told to someone else. I'll determine if that information needs to be shared, or if you say it's confidential, if that shouldn't be shared or not. But if you don't give me the whole play, how can I run the play for you in the game? So what I tell investors is, call me, tell me the scenario. Here's what we got going on. And I'll tell you, here's how we can work that out. People call me all the time and say, hey, I need an escrow officer. Okay, I know several really good escrow officers, but you need to tell me a little bit about your transaction, because maybe one escrow officer doesn't like dealing with wholesale transactions. Maybe another escrow officer likes wholesale, but they don't know probate. Maybe another escrow officer, this, that, and the other, right? And so I tell people, tell me the scenario, and then okay, I got someone for that, and I set them up with the team, and I help them make that play happen. And so when they call me or tell me that there's an issue, I am going to look after that issue. I'm going to review. I think I mentioned earlier the call that I got earlier today where they said, here's the problem. And I didn't know them and they were referred to me. I told them on the phone, I'm going to get title open. When that prelim's done, I'm going to look at it and call you with whatever the issues are, because there's potentially some issues based on the story that they told me. And I want them to know, here's how we're going to handle those issues right off the bat when the time comes. So for investors, what I do for them is I look after that transaction from start to finish. For years, it doesn't happen that much anymore. But, in some states, it's perfectly fine to do a double escrow where you have two escrows open at the same time, blah, blah, blah. Money from one escrow closes the other one. Some states, they don't have an issue with that. In California, that causes lawsuits and it causes problems sometimes. So there's other ways to work it out. There's other ways to do it. And, so I used to tell people, this is the way you keep out of jail because I don't look good in an orange jumpsuit, right? Now I kind of share it a little bit differently, but the bottom line is, hey, I understand with wholesaling, I understand what your goal is. Let's figure out the best way to get to that end result, even though what you originally were going to try may not be the right way to do it, because it's going to put us all in an orange jumpsuit that we don't want to be wearing.
And that is so good, you guys, because no matter what state you're in, I happen to be in California, Corianne's in Colorado, but you want to listen in between the lines. Don't clock out on what's being shared here. Rewatch this and rewatch it again, because there's little nuggets and subtleties in there. Well, there's some sort of hustle culture going on out here. Like everybody's transactional and you have to move at the speed of light. And sure, there's a time for that and a place for that to move. You want to be in inspired action while you're working. And there's also sometimes where you need to just slow down and really look at the details. This is one of them. These preliminary reports, it's one of them. Having the conversations with your title rep, it's one of them, because you just can't keep moving and hustling all the time. It's like an energy to the deal. So that comes with some time and maturity. Even if you are a younger person, just slow it down a little bit. It's okay. We're all going to get to the finish line. And it's very rare in a lot of ways that contracts get canceled. Once you're sort of past the preliminary inspection and all of those things, like Kevin, you can probably speak to that more because you've done so many more transactions that are, gone sideways, but for all intent and purposes, that's not what we're trying to do here. So you want to make sure that you set up expectations. I'll toot my own horn for 1 second, is that a lot of my deals don't not close because I also set up expectations for people. So if I know I see a potential ahead, like caution ahead, I will say something to the client. I will say something to the other agent in the deal. And it's not to be a dream killer. It's just to say, hey guys, let's put ourselves on high alert, because if it happens, then mentally, psychologically, we will all be prepared. That's why you want to have future pacing with clients, is you want to prepare them for the next thing coming down the road as well. That's
good. That's really good.
All right. Cool. Joel is a smarty, and he showed up in the chat with, honestly, maybe a more complex question than I know, but maybe you can catch it, Kevin. But he said, on a side note, how many of us can build relationships with title companies to generate leads and bring them businesses and referrals? Like, for example, referrals for wrap buyers who have cash but no credit, agents and sellers who have deals that failed financing and traditional, etc. Getting into the business here.
Okay, so first of all, I mentioned I'm a commission-only salesperson. So I'm always looking to create relationships. People that can bring business and that we can do things with, I'm always looking for that, absolutely. Now, how you create the relationship, this is the thing for me. I do meet with people for coffee, or we might grab lunch or something like that. But that doesn't make me want to work with someone or want to help someone because they do that. Doing business with someone is what makes me want to work for them and want to help them. And so, I've heard people a lot of times say, oh, I'm going to call this attorney and take them to lunch stuff. And I've heard the other side where the attorneys are complaining, why do these people call me and want to take me to lunch? That's not what. Call the attorney with a deal for them. Call the attorney with someone who needs to create a trust or needs to do litigation or something like that. Put money in their pocket and then see how much better that attorney answers your call, right? And it's kind of the same thing here. So I'm always looking to create relationships and grow my book of business and grow the people that I work with. And the key for me, like, you brought up a couple things, referrals for wrap buyers who have cash but no credit, agents that have deals that go sideways. There are ways to generate some of that stuff. We could talk through what you're looking for, and I could give you some options like, hey, this could be done or that can be done, but like, for instance, referrals for buyers that have cash but no credit. Most of us in title, we typically work with the real estate professionals. So I don't deal with a ton of individual consumers. I'm not dealing with the guy who tried to buy a house but couldn't qualify for his loan and got kicked out but has cash. That's not my client. His agent is my client. So sometimes I hear about that or know about that, but that's not typically my client. But me as the creative person that I am, I'm also very creative, because for stuff like that, I would say that would be something you do via webinars and seminars, and let's put that together, and I'll cover the title side and you cover the portion of how you can help them. So I think there's a way to get that done if it's going to be a mutually beneficial relationship. I'm at a point in my career where thank God, I choose who I work with, and I like to work with a lot of people, but I look for people that can do business with me. The person who constantly takes or constantly wants to call me and pick my brain, but hasn't given me a deal in 7 years, I don't necessarily have the time. If I had all the time, I would love to help everyone. And I started out in this job doing that. But as you grow and as you do more business, you get to the point where time is more valuable than anything. And maybe days when you can't even return every call that you get. And so you have to choose who you're working with and who you're calling back. So Joel, I would welcome the opportunity to talk to you about some of the things that you mentioned in that question, and some of those buyers that you're trying to find business for, or creating those relationships with those agents. We just got to talk about the details of how this could be done, what you bring to the table that they want. Investors always say, "Oh, I want to call the agent and I want them to do this deal with me." When I don't know how it is everywhere, but in our market here in Southern California, when an agent lists a property that needs work, that agent has no shortage of investors. Those investors are clamoring, knocking down the door. He or she probably has 20 to 50 that he could put that in front of, because everybody wants that. Yeah. So what are you bringing to that agent? What properties did you sell with that agent that makes it so that when you call that agent, they go, "Oh, that's John Doe. He gives me a lot of business. Let me see what he needs." Right? That's the way you got to think of it, because one hand has to wash the other.
And that doesn't really get talked about enough, Kevin. I think it does come with being seasoned in any business, but of course we'll talk about just real estate in general, where at the end of the day, it is still a relationship-based business. It's a people business. And I really get it with AI. I use some, artificial intelligence in some of the things I'm doing, because I want to keep up with the communication so that I can stay top of mind and bring value, right? So that's it's like goes hand in glove. But it's, in my opinion, it's not a substitute. We're not there, or we're not there yet. So for those of you who are particularly younger that are getting in this business in your 20s and you're wholesaling, please stop and smell the roses a little bit, because the average age of a person in real estate is somewhere in their 40s and 50s or even older. And we didn't grow up with all this technology, so we're not against it, but we go through life wanting to still get face-to-face, belly-to-belly. And that really hasn't changed much in real estate today. I know that I was 20 something too, and I was moving fast and breaking things, but don't try to be right about something, necessarily. Just sometimes you got to meet the game where it's being played. And then you can do on your off time, oh, well, I'm going to AI this and VA that, and, just expect everybody else to do your job. That's not really how real estate works. The best way you can do that is to create the relationship first. There's no way out but through. You do need to do all the jobs. You do need to start in the mailroom with everything. And maybe sooner than later you hire out, but you still need to know how to do that job, so that when all your supporting staff, teammates, right? All your supporting staff is there to support you, that you're the head on the stick. You're the one that they're calling. You're the face of your own business. But please don't do it in the opposite, because I'm hearing it every day and I'm experiencing it. Remember I told you that agent investor, right? So I'm getting the inbound calls as well. So Kevin, to your point, is that somebody that wants to create a relationship with other people in the business outside of, say, an agent who might have access to the deal, right, have access to the house, is make sure that those relationship-based ways of doing business, which is to bring value, is at the forefront of your mind, not just how many transactions you can get done.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I have a little funny story, if you don't mind me sharing. I told
Yeah.
my son to call someone, and later I found out he hadn't called. And so I talked to my son, like, hey, why didn't you call so-and-so? He goes, I did. I sent him a text.
Yeah.
I said, no, calling means I'm talking. My voice is going in the phone and my voice is coming out on the other end where the person, I had to explain. When I say call, that means call. I didn't say text them. I had given my son the person's office number because that's where they are. They're in their office. So when he sent the text goes nowhere because it's a landline or, it's a computer line or whatever. Anyway, point being that typically in our business, at some point, you're doing business face to face with someone. I mean, there's not many real estate deals that are, the contact starts with AI, all the documents are all done via AI, and then it's all done. I mean, who wouldn't love that? I would love it if I could just say, hey, Chat GPT, find me some deals, and those deals come and those deals close. But frankly, it just doesn't happen that way. There, in most businesses, somewhere in the sales cycle, it's not Amazon, right? Somewhere in the sales cycle, there's belly to belly conversations that happen, whether that's by phone or in person. And we've got to be good at those conversations and be equipped to be able to create real relationships. It's like making friends when you were kids, right? You go to a new school, none of those kids know you. So get over there and play with them and they'll get to know you. And then they'll include you in kickball next time,
Kickball. That's such a great analogy. How about dodgeball?
Dodgeball too. Yeah.
Train ourselves. Isn't that cool? Corianne, do we have any other questions, concerns? I love it.
Guys, the chat is still open for a few more minutes if you do have any questions for the amazing Kevin. Thank you so much for being here. I think this has been incredibly helpful for parts of the business that being here for 5 years in real estate, I see happen, but I don't always know exactly what's going on. And I think it's funny, especially for newbies, there's sort of a teeter-totter balance. First, you start with, well, I don't have any deals and I'm not willing to call anybody and I'm terrified to call somebody. And then sometimes you realize, oh, being on the phone isn't so bad. And then you swing a little far the other direction and you're on the phone with too many people where you're not adding value. So the goal is to get the education, to be able to start getting things under contract. And then when you're on the phones with somebody like Kevin, that you're bringing value, you're bringing transactions, because he's going to bring that right back to you. And make sure you stay out of the orange jumpsuit. I mean, it's not for me either. And that's why I'm grateful that I don't have to handle it all. I have a transaction coordinator, I have an escrow officer, I have a bunch of people that support in getting my clients through, because it allows checks and balances, additional eyes. There's a human aspect we can't get around, which means we need more humans.
That's right.
Amen. Right. And I am itching to say, or ask, I should say, of the, I don't know how many transactions, 15,000 plus transactions. I would love to know kind of the juiciest, maybe weirdest scenario, and also the most heartfelt one, right? There's got to be a few that really stand out that you go, this is why I do this business.
Yeah.
Campfire story. Let's go.
Campfire story.
Juiciest. I love this one. Okay. So this was a long time ago too. This was probably almost 20 years ago, but I have not seen one that was as good as this. So there's two siblings. There may have been more there, but there's two siblings in question here. The let's call it the sister. We're going to say sister and brother. The sister was in charge of the estate. And the sister was doing all kinds of crazy stuff and not managing the estate the way they should. And, probably stealing some stuff, but not blatantly stealing where she took, 100,000 out of the bank, but just doing stuff that the brother's she's doing this and it's wrong. And they were trying to get her out as being the administrator, trying to get her removed from being the administrator of the estate, the person in charge. They're trying. And I think they'd even gone to court and they said they're going to leave her in and give her a little bit more time. And so it starts getting worse. We're worse stuff is happening. So they're about to file again to get her out. And I get this phone call. And so it's the brother. He goes, Kevin, we got her. And I'm like, uh-oh, what happened? Right. So he goes, I'm calling you right now. I'm in an ambulance going to the hospital because she hit me with her car and broke my leg. I'm in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. That should be enough to get her out. And I was like, wow. So you're not concerned about your leg and going to the doctor. You're just glad you got your sister out from being the administrator, right? So that was one of the juiciest ones. Here's another really juicy one, because as I talk, I'll probably think of others. So this is an agent trying to get a listing, and this was a probate case. And the decedent had two sisters. Those were the closest heirs. So they're the two that are going to be in charge. They're the two that are going to get all of her property and all that. And she's trying and everything and trying to get the property. And the sisters were from out of state. And I'm like, well, if they're out of state, look, I'm reading between the lines. I'm like, look, hey, she died X amount of time. Have they been cutting the lawn? She goes, no, they're not taking care of everything. This is like 2 doors down. I said, when your gardener comes, send your gardener down there and have them cut her lawn, because it'll probably cost you $20. That's probably what, to cut the front lawn, it costs you. But I said, it'll avoid them getting hit with a city lien for having their weeds. Usually if your weeds are above your knees, the city's going to slap you with a lien. We don't want that lien on title. That's going to just, destroy it. So have them do that. And they'll see that you're doing stuff for them. You'll score brownie points with them, and they may want to work with you. So she's doing that. I'm giving her all kinds of ideas, things like that. So she calls me and says, hey, the sisters are coming in town. The memorial is tomorrow, and I'm going to be there. It starts at 10:30. I'm like, okay, cool. Call me afterwards so you can let me know how it goes. I'm anxious to know, what happens. She calls me. It's literally the next day. She calls me, and it's like 10:34. And I see the agent's name, and I'm like, wait a minute. She said the memorial service starts at 10:30. It's 10:34. Like, am I going to answer and I'm going to hear the organ playing and the preacher is giving the eulogy? Like, why is she calling me 4 minutes after the ceremony started? What's going on? I answer the phone, and I hear a lot of commotion in the background. And I'm like, hey, what's happening? I thought the memorial was going to start at 10:30. She goes, oh, they did 1 second of saying some goodbyes to her. You should see this, Kevin. I was almost going to use profanity because of what she said. It's a blank show going on here. And she said, there's attorneys here passing out their card, trying to get business. They're in there going, who wants that vase? Or I want this TV. Who wants the couch over here? They're like practically auctioning off everything in the house, giving it all away. And this was supposed to be the memorial service. Turns out, as we got more of this story later, terrible. The sisters did not like the two sisters that were living did not like the one sister that died. And this, I think she had two cars. I think one was like a 57 Chevy, like a classic old car. And I want to say there might've been 2 houses as well. But, I don't know if that's juicy, but it's just seeing the crazy stuff that goes on in some of these cases is definitely some of the juicy. Now, you said a heartfelt story. That's a little more difficult, but I can say that there have been numerous transactions where people wanted to hug me or actually did hug me because we got things through. We got the transaction closed and kind of the day was saved. I closed this morning, we closed the transaction that the agent and the escrow told me this deal is haunted because everything that could go wrong was going wrong. Problems were coming. Things were happening. FedEx picked up the deed for us to record this morning. They picked it up like Friday or over the weekend. It was supposed to be delivered yesterday, which was Monday, by 8 a.m. FedEx posted on their FedEx site that they attempted to drop it off. Ooh. Even the escrow officer knows that it was BS because at our office, we have signs on the front door, messenger deliveries, deliver them to the side. On the side, we have a bin there. And our mailroom guy gets in at like 7:15. And he said they didn't come. So we know they didn't actually attempt to deliver because, by the way, FedEx has probably been delivering to our office for 9,000 years. Nothing has changed. We didn't move or change anything. So they know just drop it in the bin. That's what they do every other day. But that morning, something must have happened with the driver or something that didn't get delivered. Long story short, that one didn't happen. But today, I was able to text the escrow officer and the real estate agent. We are now closed because the document came in later in the day yesterday. In LA County, if you don't know, you have to have the documents before like 8:30 if they're closing that day. And really, you need to have them the day before. But in this case, we could have done it if we got them by 8:30. So bottom line, they were all happy that, yay, finally, this is done. We can close and put this problem behind us. So maybe that's the happy story for us today.
It's so good.
Oh,
Kevin, how did these hours go by? I don't know, Corianne. Sometimes I feel like, the hours started. Are we going to have enough to talk about? And then it flies by. And it's like, I feel like we've barely scratched the surface. But you know what, Kevin? I mean, you're a great guy. You're a beautiful person. You're a consummate professional. And I'm sure when there's an extra, hour in your day at some other point, maybe in the fall or something, we'll have you back. Or, I think that the title is just one of these things ongoingly, like people can't ever know enough. So maybe, I'll talk about something that could be an ongoing, show or kind of reoccurring character, so to speak. But for today, thank you. I mean, just thank you. Thank your precious time. We'll never get this hour back, but I think it was time well spent. It's going to live evergreen, on the internet. And then just that I get to play with you, selfishly, I get to play with you. Corianne can't just yet because she's not in California. But if they decided they're going to put a pinky toe in here, at least they'll know your name. How do folks
find a deal out here? You got to find a deal out here so we can work together. That
yes.
would be good.
Oh, I love a challenge. Okay, it's a deal to find a deal. And for everybody that is working in California and wants to bring you a transaction, is this the best number to reach out to?
Yeah, that's my cell phone. You would reach me directly there. You can call or text. I don't know if you have my email address, but they can email me as well. I'm a little bit old school. I like the phone call. I wish I could answer every single call when it happens, but I strive to return every phone call the same day, unless you're calling in the evening. I might return it the next day, but I strive to return every single phone call that I get. And so I would love to hear from folks and create some new relationships. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I appreciate being here. I love doing this. So if you have me back, I would love to do it.
Amen. I love
it. It was
that.
an honor.
Vouch. Kevin does text back and call back. He does. He's not just saying that.
So the Ask an Agent audience is going to take good care of him because he did post his cell phone number. So make sure that you are reaching out for transactions that also put money into his pocket. Pretty please, just for me, guys. And with that, we're going to say bye till next time. Yes. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you all. Thank you, Kevin. Be safe. Enjoy.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for having me.